This is it. This is the end game for me, for Source. Hello and thank you for clicking on this video. I'll be talking about my first step towards fulfilling my audio journey, and there are very few products that make me fall in love at first glance, and this was one of them. This is the Topping DX9, which is an all-in-one DAC amp combo coming in at $1,299 US. This is also a limited edition product released by Topping to commemorate its 15-year anniversary. But before we dive deeper, if you've been enjoying what I've been putting out, I hope you consider helping me reach my goal of 3,000 subscribers by hitting that like and subscribe button. I'd appreciate it a lot. Now that's all out of the way, let's talk about unboxing experience, because the way this unit was packaged makes the unboxing experience feel very special, as it should. There's not a lot of wording on the packaging apart from information about the unit itself, with a preview of the DX9 at the front of the box, following the footsteps of Apple box designs. Tearing that outer layer reveals another box, and opening that box reveals the unit in all its glory, with a blue cloth surrounding it. It's like unboxing a piece of jewelry. Under the unit itself is where you have the accessories, and it comes with some instruction manuals, which you can scan the QR code to access them to save on the amount of paperwork. There's a Bluetooth antenna, 6.4 to 3.5mm converter, and the controller, which is made out of metal, unlike Topping's other plastic controllers. And this metal controller comes unscrewed, and that's because you have to remove the internal circuit to insert your battery, which uses a CR2035 battery. And once you pop that in, insert the circuit back into the controller, then the faceplate over, screw the 3 screws at the back, which are extremely tiny, so try not to lose it, but it comes with a small wrench to complete the job, and off you go. This controller has some heft to it due to the material, and if you throw this thing, it'll cause some damage, but it's going to be the most premium looking and feeling remote control amongst your device controllers. The design of the Topping DX9 is nothing short of breathtaking. It's really surprising not a lot of people are talking about this unit, especially on YouTube, because this unit is gorgeous. In terms of desktop units, the DX9 beats everything I've seen so far, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. If you think any unit looks like this or even better, share with me in the comment section down below. The curved corners on the edges, the symmetry on the front faceplate with a big round knob in the middle with 2 screens on the side, more on that later. The overall unit itself is relatively thin, but it's elevated by its own feet on 4 corners. And the highlight of this product, the feature that stood out even from the photos, this glass component at the top of the device, revealing all the internal circuitry of the Topping DX9 with explanation of each component on the face of the glass. Everything inside of this device is arranged meticulously to form this structure and order, and then you plug in the device and turn it on, and that glow that illuminates the circuitry inside the board and the black powder coat finish on the body simply enhances the illumination. This unit does come in silver as well, which should be better in terms of heat management, but the black with that glow makes this one of the sexiest all-in-one unit I've seen, and there's only a few sources that make you utter that word, aside from tube amps. Some of them are art pieces. All in all, there's not much more I need to say about this unit, as it should speak for itself. I've had people come into the room, and this is the first thing that takes their attention on my desk. The looks alone was half of the reason why I purchased this unit, so let's dive deeper onto the other half and see if it stacks with how it looks. Is it all looks but no substance? So for inputs and outputs, starting at the front, you have a 6.35mm single-ended output, followed by a 4.4mm balanced output, and then a 4-pin XLR output. At the back, you have 8 different inputs to connect to the DX9, 2 optical inputs, 2 coaxial inputs, AES, IIS, USB, Bluetooth. There's a 12-volt trigger linkage. You've got RCA and XLR outputs for line out, and also preamplifier line outs. So pretty much whatever you need from either a DAC or an amp, aside from lines for speakers, you have it here on the DX9. So going through some button controls, power button is located on the left side of the unit. Pressing and holding it will turn the device on or off. Pressing it once will open up the menu, then you can use the volume knob or the remote to toggle between the menu options. For the volume knob, pressing the volume knob once will toggle between the different input selection, but if you're in the menu option, pressing it once is pretty much the toggle switch. But before we dive deeper into that, just going through the remote control functions really quickly. The top two button controls are the power and mute button. The middle button controls the preamplifier output selection. You've got the plus and minus for volume control. The left and right on the circle will control the input selection, similar to hitting the volume knob on the device once. Then you have the headphone icon button, which toggles between which output at the front, either single-ended 4.4 or XLR. The line out button to toggle between RCA, XLR, or all of them, since you can use the DX9 for its DAC features. The FIR button toggles between filters, and for menu button, auto button to toggle between 12-volt trigger, signal, or off, and the brightness button where you can toggle between auto, middle, or high. So back to the device itself, once you're in the menu option, you have a display setting where you can switch between a few different display options. In normal mode, you have the display showing information about input, what bitrate and filter you're on, and it's on the right side of the screen, and on the left side, it'll show you which output, gain, volume, and which headphone output is selected. Switching it to VU, you have essentially a VU display, and you can swap the VU style from classic with the needle look to something a bit more modern if you like. And playing music through the DX9 will have this interface reacting to the sound. You can also set the dB to +10 or +4 dB, and lastly you have FFT, where you can see which frequency is playing depending on the sound, which is a very nice little preview to understanding the world of frequency response. If you're playing something with a bit more bass, you can see that happening in the lower regions, treble peaks going in the upper regions. I personally stick to this interface as you get to see what's happening in your music as you're listening to it, which is pretty fun. There's also a level meter where you can toggle if you want to show it on the normal display, FFT display, or all, but of course not on the VU display setting. You can choose to invert the screen if you like. There's an option to toggle the internal LED from low to medium to high, depending on how much you want to showcase the internals of the DX9. I think medium is sufficient, but your preferences may vary. You can toggle the output mode and select if you want to output from the headphone, preamplifier, or line out, or all, which is great if you are connected through different devices and you want something to play but not the others, so this selection is nice to have. And then the rest is pretty much the same, where you can toggle input selection similar to how it was done through the remote control. You can also toggle the headphone output selection, preamplifier output selection, and following that you can also toggle the gain mode from here, and it's a selection between low and high. Then back to the usual, where you can toggle between the 12-volt trigger selection, toggling between different PCM filters as already shown in the remote control section, but in the menu you can also toggle between different DSD filters, and you've got two options to choose from. There's also advanced settings where you can adjust the channel balance. Similar to what you saw from the KA15 video, you can select DAC mode, enable or disable Bluetooth, enable or disable remote control. You can even go as far as to determine what your button does, so you can choose between input select, output, home. Basically, there's a lot of options for you to choose from. You can set the USB between 1.0 or 2.0. Then there's a whole lot of IIS setting, which I personally have not delved into this world as of yet, but if you're familiar with this world, the option is available for you. And there's even an option to disable or enable DSD bypass. And lastly, you've got the language selection between Chinese and English, and factory reset. I mean, is that not enough for you? I've got way more than I need in my opinion, but if there's something that you think should have been included in an all-in-one DAC M unit, let me know in the comment section down below. But for me, I'm glad I have all these options, and I hope Moondrop brings in a few more display options to play around with. But even if they don't, it's still more than what most all-in-one units have in their system. So the best way I can describe about what the DX9 brings to your sound would be comparing it against other sources. sources. So let's talk about comparing the DX9 with one of their most popular stack, which is the A90 and D90 stack. And the ones I used to own before switching to the DX9 was the A90D and D90 SE. So in terms of the difference between the inputs and outputs, the DX9 has pretty much the same inputs and outputs as the topping A90 and D90 SE stack, with maybe an additional coaxial and optical input on the DX9. In terms of power output, they're both rated about the same, with the DX9 being able to output about 10 watts at 16 ohms, with the A90D outputting about 9.8 watts at 16 ohms, which is to say they're both very similar in terms of output power, and they both can power up most of the headphones in the market today. In terms of inputs and outputs, I think because the A90 and D90 is very comparable to the DX9 in terms of functions and features, the only factor aside from the looks that would affect your purchasing decision would be their versatility. When it comes to that, the stack is clearly the better option due to the fact you can swap and pair the amp or DAC to separate pairings, because the amp and DAC is their own dedicated unit, whereas on the topping DX9 is an all-in-one unit. So there's that convenience in that. However, it's also a drawback because if there are any issues, whether it's in the DAC or amp component of the DX9, then the entire unit is compromised, as it would be for any all-in-one unit. And it's no different here. Whereas for the stack, if either the DAC or amp is defective, simply swap it out with another source and you're good to go. The DX9 can work as a standalone DAC and pair it with another amp. However, you can't use the DX9 as an amp and pair it with a DAC. Again, another common feature for all-in-one units, and I feel this is a deciding factor for anyone looking to choose between a stack or an all-in-one unit, because with the A90 and D90, it almost makes purchasing the DX9 pointless unless you really want that one or two additional features, because of how similar they are in terms of power, features, and sound. Speaking of which, in terms of what they do to sound, unfortunately I don't have the stack with me anymore to make a thorough comparison, but from memory, they sound somewhat similar in a way where, similar to many of the topping products, they present a sound that is very clean, notes appear snappy and well-rounded, they bring in a bit more clarity and energy to the upper regions as well. So if you're pairing this or any topping devices with a headphone that has a bright sounding signature, that features will be accentuated a little bit more than if you paired it with a warmer sounding source. The perfect pairing for me right now will be putting the DX9 with my Focal Utopia 2022, which is supposedly a warmer sounding headphone. The bass is coming across with a sense of speed and clarity, the sharpness of the vocals are coming through and opening up the sound a little bit more. All I can describe from the overall sound experience is a sense of clarity that comes through. I think as an overall, even if there were any differences between the two, it would have been so minor that it will be very hard to distinguish unless you're trying really hard to focus on the differences, unlike comparing it with a warmer sounding source. Speaking of which, another one of my favorite all-in-one DAC amp unit to use is the HiFiMan EF400. The HiFiMan sources sound warmer, but before we talk about sound, let's explore some of the functions and features first. In terms of power, the HiFiMan EF400 is able to deliver up to 4.4 watts per channel, while the topping produces up to 10 watts at 16 ohms or 7 watts at 32 ohms. So while I had no problems with the HiFiMan EF400 powering my headphones, even with the HiFiMan HE1000V2, the topping DX9 is a powerhouse compared to the EF400. So it should be able to power up almost 95% of the headphones in the market today. I am very curious to test the Susvaras against the DX9 someday. In terms of outputs, they both have the XLR 6.4 and 4.4 outputs at the front, but the HiFiMan EF400 has an additional 3.5mm output, which is why in terms of testing products, the HiFiMan EF400 is a really great option for that due to the amount of outputs, but the topping DX9 has plenty, and if you want 3.5, you just need a 6.4 to 3.5mm converter. In terms of inputs and outputs, the DX9 just offers a lot more options, with the EF400 only having XLR and RCA outputs out, Type-C and Type-A USB inputs, and that's pretty much it. And for its price, the HiFiMan EF400 offers enough for desktop use, but the topping DX9 having a much higher price tag definitely brings more options to the table. And I feel you're getting what you're paying for the topping DX9 with all the functions and features mentioned earlier. In terms of sound, as mentioned earlier, putting the Focal Utopia 2022 on the HiFiMan EF400, the bass sounds a touch fuller, a touch warmer, soundstage sounds like they open up a bit, the energy up top seems to be smoothened over ever so slightly. However, because the Focal Utopia 2022 is already a warm sounding headphone to my ears, I feel adding that additional layer of warmth isn't the best complement to this headphone. So in this instance, pairing the Focal Utopia 2022 with the topping DX9 was my personal preference because details sound a touch more distinct, there's a bit more sharpness and clarity to the notes and upper regions of the frequency. You do lose a bit of that fullness, but as a trade-off, you're getting a bit more speed and attack. It all depends on the flavor of the day, and the DX9 doesn't replace the HiFiMan EF400 because it's like having different headphones with different flavors. But if I had to choose one, it depends on the headphones you have now. But for me, of course, since the topping DX9 sounds great and already does so much more than the EF400, the DX9 would be the pick. But that's also saying the HiFiMan EF400 is no slouch and still my top pick for anyone looking for a solid all-in-one combo with a warm sounding delivery, and it's cheaper too. So in summary, with how much power the topping DX9 brings to the table and how beautiful this thing looks, if my Source journey ends with the topping DX9, I'd be completely fine. Maybe I'd be itching to have a warmer alternative, and you know, in the audio world, you're always curious about the next latest and greatest, but as it stands now, the topping DX9 is one sexy, powerful beast of a Source. However, this has all been one man's experience, and I'm curious to know yours. Would you be getting this limited edition all-in-one Source, or is there a Source sexier than the topping DX9? Let me know in the comment section down below, and with that all said, thank you once again to all of you for watching, and see you all in the next video.